in-depth exploration of the world of women today with Sandra Elkin.
Good evening and welcome to Woman. Tonight, more money talk. My guest is Phyllis Chesler. Phyllis is the author of Women and Madness. She is the co-author of Women, Money, and Power. She has just completed a book titled Lovers and Warriors, a psychological meditation on men. Phyllis has a doctorate in psychology and is a member of many professional and feminist organizations. Phyllis, welcome to Woman.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Before we get into money, I'd like to tell you how much I really liked Women in Madness, and I'm sure a lot of people in our audience have read the book and liked it also.
Yes, thank you. I was very privileged to have written that book. I think it is a very powerful and very wonderful book, and I'm glad that it's had an impact, and it has.
Yeah, I think it certainly has. Phyllis, tell me why that you think that suddenly money and power have become the issues.
I think they always were the issues. I think that now women are more able to talk about sex, who should have orgasms, how many times, and with who, and what's politically correct, than to talk about money. And I find this very peculiar. And in interviewing women who make a lot of money for a woman, there's a very big double standard in terms of what's good money for a woman and for a man. They're different. Just as there's a female financial top and a male financial top, and they're two very different tops that never meet. Women are very ambivalent about money. It's almost as if you're not supposed to make money like make sex. You're not supposed to say you want it. Money is dirty, evil, not nice. Nice girls get bought. They don't do the buying. Women bankers, or women even at middle management levels, pay with credit cards, especially with male clients, because they can't suddenly expose a bankroll at a dinner table because that's somehow sexual. Only it's not sexual. It's a display of power, which women are not allowed to display or have. So that women now related, I think, to money is the question of what is labor, what's work. So that women will say, oh, I don't work, I'm a housewife. Oh, I don't work, I'm a mother. Oh, I thank you very much that you enjoyed the dinner I cooked for 25. It was nothing. And I think that if women are doing the greatest volunteer work in the world as mothers and wives, we have to decide whether that is productive labor. If it is, why did the economists not put it into the gross national product? Why can women work all their lives raising the citizens of the world and get no Social Security, no pension, no health insurance? If we thought motherhood was valuable, then upon completion of this task, women would immediately go to Congress and would run the governments of the world. But this is not as it is. In fact, women who choose the option of motherhood, and there are very few other options to choose, when they get divorced or separated, they do not get alimony. At most, they get child support for 1 year. Most women don't know how much money their husbands earn and aren't told. More important, most husbands don't earn very much money. So when they do leave one family, they can't support two families because they usually begin another family. Most men are not given the kind of wages by corporate capitalist structures to be able to really reflect the labor of a wife at home, taking care of his emotional and sexual needs, as well as bringing up his genetic reproductions, the children that he legally owns, so that women are totally removed from the money culture and feel somehow that we should be removed, that nice women don't get involved with money. Nice women get bought.
Phyllis, earlier when you were starting to make your point, you said there's a double standard about what's a good salary for a woman. Can you name some figures?
Oh,
like,
God,
what is
yes.
a good salary for a woman?
Well, some of the women I talked to, I said, what do you think is a lot of money? The answers ranged from $100 a week after taxes to not higher than about $50,000 a year. Now, living in New York City, $50,000 a year is not a lot of money. Women have no idea of what a lot of money is, objectively speaking, most women. Most women psychologically are so trained to avoid something worse from happening, namely social ostracism, name-calling, rape, death, being beaten up, that they can't possibly pay much attention to achieving something better. And information is withheld from women about money. I think we need economic consciousness raising.
Before you get into that, wasn't a study done either in a university or by an insurance company where women rated limbs that are lost in accidents?
Yes, yes. This was a horrible, grotesque
Was
study.
it a university study?
It was published in a learned journal, let's put it that way. I believe it was funded by an insurance company. Women generally tend to get awarded less money when they have been injured in accidents than men. They usually ask for less. This was a study asking men and women, how would you rate monetarily your eye, your hand, your leg, and of course your penis. They did not ask women to rate the value of their uteruses or men to rate the value of breasts, although women very often lose or get jobs precisely for these reasons or don't get them. And men rated their eyes and their limbs. Eyes, for example, men rated them worth $25,000. Women rated them worth $10,000. Now this is an acceptance of a lower body value, or, I mean, what should we call it? Lower self-esteem, hatred of self, acceptance of mutilation, of being of lesser value? I don't know how else to interpret it. I think that women, one of the ways that women who work outside the home for direct wages deal with the fact that not only do we not get equal pay for equal work, not only are superior and competent women punished for competence rather than rewarded and have to fight hard to even stay at a low level, but there is no equal pay for equal work. Women deal with this fact by denying that discrimination exists, by dissociating themselves from the plight of women who are worse off. It could always be worse. If that woman over there just got fired because she's a feminist, or because she's too outspoken, or because she threatened the men too much, what has that got to do with me? I'm going to put my head down. I'm happy, at least I have a job. And she's not totally wrong, but it's very dangerous because she'll be next. The third,
How do women deny they're being discriminated against?
they say that they're happy with what they have, that they're not aware that men earn more money for doing the same work. They're not aware that men get different titles to justify earning more money for doing the same work. They deny it in the same way that powerless and oppressed people deny that they're being oppressed, because it is painful and difficult to say, I am angry and I am wounded because I have been economically and spiritually transgressed against from birth, and I am at the moment powerless to change it. That is a difficult statement to make. I walk the streets alone at night, unprotected, I have no gun, I can't fight, and I can be killed because I'm physically weaker. That's a difficult statement to make. I would prefer to say, well, you know, I don't think that those crime statistics are really exactly true. They don't affect me. I'm not afraid. I'll be okay. It's not going to happen to me. I deny that violence exists. But let me get back to the third way that women psychically cope with economic discrimination outside the home is by adopting a posture of deference, by deferring always to the status quo, which all women do, married, single, PhDs, MDs, no education. Nurses know much more about the care of patients than doctors do, for example. When nurses are dealing with interns just out of medical school, they say things like, doctor, I think perhaps it might be better, you might consider that if you give this drug, maybe, doctor, perhaps in your opinion, and then the doctor says, yes, I think you have a point, okay, I've decided that. So that the approach has always got to be deferential, and then you never get the credit. I mean, the nurses don't get paid more money for the doctors. They're not called the educators of the new doctors. They're not in charge of the hospitals. The problem with being deferential is that being deferential is not the same as being nice or being human. it's an expression of powerlessness. It means that you want to put those in power at ease, because if you don't, they'll display anger, they'll fire you, or they'll hit you, and you want to avoid that worst thing from happening. Being deferential has never gotten powerless people, women especially, any power. Mrs. Ted Kennedy, Martha Mitchell, Jacqueline Onassis Kennedy, Mrs. Trudeau, all of the women whom other women assume have a lot of power or meet interesting people or have social charisma, they do not have power. You cannot influence decisions that relate to war and peace or planetary pollution by making deferential, silent, quiet, personal suggestions in the bedroom or at the dining table. It does not work that way.
These are the women that are mentioned, though, most often when you think in terms of powerful women.
Yes, one of the major national women's magazines every year does a study of the women most admired by other women. And you always get women who are married to politically powerful men, except for Golda Meir. She keeps cropping up in her own right because she exudes a grandmother image, and that is also acceptable. Women are frightened of women who appear to have real power on their own, and there are very few women like that. Let me make something clear. Women do not own or control the wealth in America or in the world. Individuals don't. Only large corporations do.
That's a thing we hear all the time, though, that women control the wealth in this country.
But this is not true. Every so often, for tax purposes, individual men who don't control the wealth as individuals will put real estate property into their wives' names. But that woman doesn't often know what she's signed. Women are told to sign the income tax form at the end of the year without looking at it, without knowing what's there. In fact, very often husbands will cover the top and say, sign here. I've seen that happen.
But they're still liable, aren't they? Those
Yes,
women who
that is
sign
correct.
without knowing what's on there.
Right. So that women don't own stocks, but then most poor people, which means the majority of the people in the country do not own the wealth in the country. Women who are the wives and daughters of the ruling class men in America also don't own, or rather they do not manage or control the inheritances in their own names. They're on a very high level of welfare. They may engage in social philanthropy, or they may lead relatively trivial lives, or they may be guilty and torn, but they're not in the boardrooms, they're not the heads of the corporations. The very few women who are at the female financial top, without exception, are there because they are the wives and the daughters of the men at the male financial top. And they have to be married mothers, preferably widows, because we don't like to think that women can either have both learning and a sex life or money and a sex life. Women have got to give up or choose things that we don't expect men to have to choose or give up.
What about mother power, Phyllis? That's a thing we hear a lot. We hear that, you know, mothers are the most powerful people in the world, the hand that rocks the cradle kind of thing.
I wish that were true. It is not true. Jessie Bernard, by the way, has a very nice book called The Paradox, The Future of Motherhood. And she makes many points about the powerlessness of motherhood. Let me put it this way, that parents, and mothers especially, have a delusion that they can be omnipotent in controlling the lives of their children. Peer group pressure, history, social culture, and outside influence, education, etc., comes in very quickly to take away the hold that a mother is trying to think she has over children. Now, women as mothers are not organized like General Motors or like the military-industrial complex. So if they decide that, you know, the food that their children have to eat or the air that their children have to breathe is really not good, it's poisonous in fact, they can say, okay, these are our demands, and if our demands are not met immediately, we're going to X, Y, Z. Each woman as mother is very, very busy, overworked, not paid, very tired, and doesn't have access to enough information. Like consumers, mothers are not organized to control the air their children breathe. So they may like to think that their psychological input or control is equivalent to being able to force the HEW into approving or not approving certain drugs, or force the scientists or, you know, big manufacturers into polluting rivers and air or not, but they can't. So that from one point of view, women as mothers are totally devalued by most major religions. That's female biology, which is being devalued, and certainly by the tax structure in America. Let me give you an example. Oil companies have oil depletion allowances. This is very interesting logic. They're saying, you know, for every bucket of oil that we take out of the earth, one less bucket can come out. Therefore, we're going to get tremendous tax benefits because the supply is limited. Now, across the board, such reasoning would lead women to saying, for every child I have, that's one less child that I can have, and therefore, what's $700 a year tax write-off for a child? It should be an enormous write-off. Women don't think this way. The tax structure doesn't reflect such thinking. When men go to war, sent there by other men, they can, if they survive, apply for loans for housing, loans for education. When women are finished with the battle or the war of motherhood, they can't get loans like this. They can't apply for them. They don't even think this way. We are genuinely being taxed without being represented. And once, I believe in America, about 200 years ago, there was a tea party because of this.
Oh, I've heard of that tea
You heard of that tea party? Well, I think maybe we need another tea party.
I think maybe you're right. Well, you've made a terrific case for, you know, discrimination and why it's important. Last week, we did another program on money, and we're going to do a couple more after this. Our guest was Elizabeth Forsling Harris, and Betty said that she felt that what women want is 50% of the dollar, 50 cents on every dollar. Now, would you agree with that?
Well, let me qualify what that would mean. I think if we decide that motherhood and being a housewife, which is what most women do because they must do, is labor and is productive labor, then like medicine, we have to say, do we wish to socialize it? And if so, how? Because 50 cents on the dollar, if you're not getting a dollar, you can't get 50 cents of nothing if you're in the home. If you are relatively privileged and in the minority in terms of being part of middle management and corporate industry, yes, you should get 50 cents on the dollar, but this will have virtually no effect on the lives of most workers and all women in the country, numerically speaking. So that I'm in favor, look, I am in favor of having total feminist control of all organized religions, all systems of military hardware, all governments in the world. Now, this requires a great deal of money and a great deal of power, so that I would not quarrel with 50 cents. I would like a dollar. After we have a dollar, we can deal. We can make it equal, 50-50. But we're working from a position of nothing right now. The only women who can bargain for 50 cents of a dollar are a minority of women, relatively privileged, relatively well-educated, placed in token positions in the economy with no power to affect the lives of the mass of working people in the country.
You sound like Gloria Steinem, who was on the program some time ago, and said she would like to take an army of women to Arabia and sit on the oil wells and say, deal.
Yes, we talked about that, Gloria and I. I would like, certainly, to own Kuwait. Then we deal. Well, let me put it another way. As women, definitely as feminists, we are in exile all over the world. I wish that we were a government in exile, and that the next step would be observer status somewhere in terms of meaningless diplomatic bodies like the United Nations. But before that, the question is, well, should we then own homes in our own names? Should we buy acreage in our own names? It requires money to do that. Do we wish to own an air force and an army, as the men say, to deter the other air forces and armies from attacking us so that we can defend ourselves? Do we want to have a government? Do we want to control the religion? Do we want in to the religions that exist? Well, we may need our own sacred space and territory to have that. This requires enormous amounts of money. How each woman or how many different groups of women will get that money is going to be very diverse. I don't think that there's one way or one right way. I do think that it's urgent to begin amassing money, or its equivalent. If we lived in a seashell culture, I would say let's amass seashells. Money is a sacred power to men. It controls all the other forms of power. In communist countries, there are equivalents of money. There are power block equivalents of money. So it's not just money. It's simply that money is important to get anything done if you live in a money culture. Money buys health, and it buys housing where the sunlight comes in, and it buys doctors for yourself and your children. Women need help. I talked about some of the kinds of help that women need in Women in Madness, but I'm increasingly convinced that first we need the housing, the child care, the health care, the friendship networks, and the jobs. This is
before you go to Kuwait, right?
Well, I think we'd get it quick if we went to Kuwait first. But then to go to Kuwait, we couldn't just be nice little girls speaking up naively, saying the truth to history and expecting a bouquet. That's not the way it works, unfortunately.
There are a lot of people with lots of theories. I mean, there are people who say we have to change the system. We should have a socialist form of government. There are people who say, you know, who don't agree on the cause of all of this. There are people who say that women should become consumers, block-type consumers, and therefore they have the power to change the system. And what do you really think is going to be the thing that will turn us all around?
All of us. Let me say that I don't think that all of us, even just women, all women can be turned around until we have money to eat with, until we write checks in our own names, until we have jobs that we get paid money for doing, hopefully that have some dignity or meaning attached to the labor.
So we're back to your very first point, which is economic consciousness raising.
Yes. I don't think that we can read Lenin, Marx, Mao, Che, and foolishly mouth these truths in the abstract in America without realizing that each of those revolutions cost money, people time, blood, money for guns, money for land, money for food. We're starting out from the very beginning. We must, not through dependence or love on another person, child, parent, husband, father, we have to earn our money in our own right, in our own name, and we must each have our own room. Then, when enough women are in that position, the question that you ask, well, how are we really going to change the injustice, the incredible evil of chronic war, of the death of the planet, of, there are so many, it's hard to know. Let's just call it evil. How can women change this? We can't change anything until we have money, which will lead us to having power.
And there really aren't any women now who have money, right? I mean, this is what you say in the book.
Yes, that's right. I think there are women who have a lot of money for women. I think there are women who are at a female financial top, which is not the male financial top.
But we have a lot of affirmative action programs going, a lot of legislation pending, a possible Social Security bill for housewives.
I didn't mean to look so, but you know, we have nothing. The spirit of affirmative action is lacking in the souls of most of the male and the few female legislators and judges, people in Congress and the Senate, and in the big businesses that control our governments. Women, when affirmative action gets spoken about, you say, well, let's try to get a black woman, two birds, one stone. Let's try to get a token anti-feminist woman, somebody who's very deferential, knows her place, and will squash the other women, or squash people who are looking for justice or equality or even social change. I do think, however, that reforms are very necessary. I am not contemptuous of reforms. The Supreme Court worries me now. I liked their reversal of the Utah decision recently that said that a woman who was pregnant could not receive unemployment for 3 months before she gives birth and 6 weeks after. They reversed this Utah decision. Douglas was still on the court. He's not there now. And they have just recently ruled in a very ambiguous manner in relation to abortion, namely federally funded hospitals are now allowed, if doctors don't wish to perform abortions, that's okay. Now, I think it is important to have women in Congress, women in the Senate. It's very important to have women lobbying in Washington, where, as a matter of fact, a group of women, myself included, are going to be starting a women's health lobby. And that will require a great deal of money and time. And to speak very simply, it costs me to fly on a plane or to even rent a horse to get, or to steal a horse, you know, to get to Washington. It costs me to sleep there and to eat there. It will cost money to pay a qualified lobbyist. It will cost money to get scientists to consult, to look at the drugs or the medical practices. This is reform, this is revolution, and this costs money. One of the things that surprised me, and I shouldn't be surprised, is that women want so much of what money buys, but then they say they don't want money.
It's we have a long history behind us, don't we? We don't have any more time to talk, really, but I just want to throw this at you really quickly. It's been a long time that we've been told all these negative things, that we have no power, we have no money, and very little access to it. Is there a way, do you think, to have economic consciousness, as you talk about, without being so negative about it?
Oh, yes. No, I think that it's very important to face the truth and to know what the truth is. Only at that point can you begin to act intelligently, take courageous action, take risks, or even cut your losses and go slowly or go quickly. If your head is in the sand, you can't do anything. So that I think that this book reveals very clearly what woman's economic position is. That doesn't mean I think it is hopeless or that it won't change or that it shouldn't change. I think it must change. I think it will.
Thank you, Phyllis, for being here. I'll see you in Kuwait. Thank you for watching. Next week we're going to be very specific on how women should cope with money, especially single women. Good night.
Woman was produced by WNED-TV, which is solely responsible for its content, and was funded by public television stations, the Ford Foundation, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.